Well, good. It's so nice to see who's going to be visiting with us and teaching us this summer. So I'm sure we'll see a lot of them while we're at Vacation Bible School. So you all can take the animals back where they're living right now. And thank you very much for introducing us. So we'll be covering a lot of time. Jesus in eternity past to Jesus in eternity future. Our whole Vacation Bible School is about Jesus. This time we're going to something called a time lapse so that we can travel from thousands or millions or whatever years ago before Jesus was creating the world to all God is doing then to the time in the future where we haven't been yet, where he is preparing a place for us. So we're glad to have this whole focus on Jesus this year with the children, with the teens, and with the adults. And as you know, many, many people in our congregation participate, and we're always so thankful to have everybody helping at a different age level or helping to prepare or doing food and all kinds of things that we do. It's time to register now. You may have seen out in the atrium the registration table. We like to get as many people pre-registered as we can. That helps us to be less busy on Monday, the first day of Bible school. We've also been showing you these flyers that are out in the narthex for you to recruit people in your neighborhood or at work. There are flyers for you to use to bring more people. As we know, more than about 70% of the people at Vacation Bible School come from the community. And we've been delighted to see our teenagers or kids that we had when they were 4. They just love to keep coming back, and we're very happy to have that. There are a few other ways we can use your help. We may need at least maybe one more person to work in the nursery, which is children 0 to 3. And I'd even like to have another person we call teen guides. The job of the teen guide is the one who just walks with the children to all the different centers they go to. Teen guides don't have to teach, but they do need to like children and want to help them get through the program each night. We have 6 wonderful Bible teachers this year that will be in the sections for the kids to learn all about Jesus through time. As usual, we have our sponsor program, where if you give us $5, that's enough to feed 5 people a meal. And it's been really good to have our community here support our meal program. And out in the atrium, you'll see a gauge that's going to go up from $0 up to, we're hoping, maybe even $400 or $500, $400 I think this year, to help us pay for the food because we give a free meal. And we've also been telling you about our silent auction that Ms. Pearl Fuller is leading. And actually, we're going to have you put everything in room 4. We keep changing the room number, but it's going to be room 4. If you have some very interesting items, or even if you want to offer some service that you can do that people are glad to pay for in the silent auction. And in your handout today, your bulletin today, you got this prayer sheet. And maybe I should have started with this because we believe that prayer undergirds everything we do. And this gives you some ideas about what you might pray for. You're certainly feel free to pray for anything that the Lord brings to your mind. But these are some thoughts about what we really appreciate prayer as you join us that way in preparing for Vacation Bible School. And the last thing I want to mention is, like last year, we're closing Vacation Bible School with a picnic on the Sunday after VBS is over. On the 24th it will be. We had good response to that last year, and we decided we'd like to try that again. Another twist for that is that the Martha's class, the men's Sunday school class, is the group that's going to pull the picnic off. So that will be an extra excitement for us to see what the men give us for the picnic. Thank you very much, and register for VBS today.
God. Breathe the fresh winds of the Spirit. Taste, children of God. Taste the thirst-quenching waters of God's love. Touch, children of God. Touch the heat, the life-giving Spirit of God. Please remain standing if you're able for a praise song.
While I run this race, my phone. And don't let these voices, these octogenarians and nonagenarians, leave this planet without your getting them, capturing them. Come, mother. This is Catherine Lanora English Farmer Robinson. I'm really going to get it, she said. I have a seat you right here, dear. You may sit down. That was my wife. I can tell you something about my wife in relation to my mother. And Donald, you are recording, yes? Thank you. Thank you. My wife once said to me, she said it, my mother has said to me a couple of times, this is really a wonderful line. She said, I am richer than Donald Trump. I said, why so? She said, because I have a family. And she said, and I have daughters-in-law with whom I'm so comfortable. She said, I could go to your house even if you're not there. She said, my daughters-in-law are really daughters-in-love. And she treats them that way. They're like daughters to her. And I thought, well, okay, thank you very much. I'm unnecessary. But she said, I could go to your house even if you're not there and be perfectly comfortable and be welcome. And she said, not every mother-in-law has that. And you know that's true, don't you? Some of you know that's true. Thank you for coming to sit up here. I'm going to ask you only 2 questions, and then I'm done, I promise. May I tell your age? Yes. My mother was born, our mother was born on October the 16th, 1930. So she's 87, will be 88 in October. And I think she looks fabulous. I want to ask you 2 questions, and I want you to use this mic. You once said to me in a previous interview that you always wanted to be a mother. You have given birth to 6 children. Tell me what being a mother has meant to you.
I think it's the
Hold this
greatest job.
You're going to hold the fire. You know,
Underappreciated, but it's so gratifying to have these little people that look up to you, aggravate you, and you love them all the more. You're doing a job, you're a teacher, you're a nurse, you're a psychologist, you wear all those hats, and then people just say you're just a stay-at-home mother. You're doing a job. And it's a very gratifying job. And I'm still getting paid for it.
you and I talk a lot about death. You're not afraid of death, neither am I. Not today. We talk very honestly about when we go home to be with the Lord. You talk about your service, what you like said, and what songs you like to have, and all of that. When you leave the planet and you go home to be with the Savior whom you love, how do you want to be remembered? This is a question I ask many of my elders. How do you want to be remembered? What do you want people to say?
That I love the Lord first, I love my family second, and we're all family because we're all God's children. And my sense of humor. But I just want to be remembered as a loving, caring person.
You are. Thank you very much. going to get that very rarely, very rarely. In fact, that will probably never happen again here. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I really do, I'm very, very serious when I tell those of you who are fortunate enough to have your elders still with you, you need to be capturing them. Not just still photos, you need video, because years from now, you'll just want to hear their voices, and you want to see the way they moved and the way they used their hands. You just want to capture all of that. Don't let them get away from here without sitting for some video. Just a few minutes each visit. You'll be so glad you did that. You're welcome. Katrina?
Yes, sir.
Is the choir ready to minister the music?
All right.
All right.
Yes, we are.
Let's do this. this series the last Sunday in June, Lord willing. We are working our way through selected passages in the book of Job. Today I'd like to look at chapter 17. If you're able, would you please stand for the reading of a few verses of the 17th chapter. The entire chapter would be my text, but I don't want to read all of it right now. I'll point you to parts of it as we go along. I simply want to set it up and show you where I got perhaps I'll show you where I got the sermon title as we read along. I'm calling this sermon Broken Spirits and Dim Eyes. The first part of that title comes from verse 1. Book of Job, chapter 17. My spirit is broken. My days are extinguished. The grave is ready for me. Are not mockers with me? And does not my eye dwell on their provocation? Now put down a pledge for me with yourself. Who is he who will shake hands with me? For you have hidden their heart from understanding. Therefore you will not exalt them. He who speaks flattery to his friends, even the eyes of his children will fail. But he has made me a byword of the people, and I have become one in whose face men spit. Is the second part of my title. My eye has also grown dim because of sorrow, and all my members are like shadows. I want to talk about broken spirits and dim eyes. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. Now, O Lord, may the words of this preacher's mouth and the meditations of these hearers' hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. And the worshipers said, Amen. This first person, very vulnerable, revealing chapter of Job, chapter 17, is sad. There's no other word for it. He's still answering Eliphaz. We know that from chapter 15, verse 1. Eliphaz speaks. And then 16:1, Job answers. And 17 is a continuation of the answer. Margaret Brackenbury Crook, in her very helpful commentary on the book of Job, says, and I quote, "The whole dreadful miscarriage of justice continues unabated." What we're seeing here in this book, according to Crook, is a miscarriage of justice. Here is a righteous man. God said it of him himself in chapter 1. There was no one more righteous than Job in his time, in his area. He was the most holy man, most righteous man around. But listen to him by the time we get to chapter 17. My spirit is broken, verse 1. My days are extinguished, verse 1. The grave is ready for me, verse 1. People spit in my face, verse 6. My purposes are broken off. And such are some of us.
Yes, yes,
You have probably felt like Job at some point, haven't you?
yes.
Life stinks. Is this it? And I have been faithful to God, and look at what I'm experiencing. Some of you have said, and I'm a tither. And look at this. I've been faithful to my family, faithful to my spouse. I've done good work, and look at this. I'm a Sunday school teacher, and this? There's not a person in this worship space that has not experienced some of what Job has experienced. At least you've felt like he feels. I want to remind you that feelings are dangerous as a driver of life. You don't You don't want to live your life on feelings. Very dangerous. How many of you are married here? May I see your hands, please? Some of you are, just don't want to raise your hand. There are some days when we feel married. The other comes in the room and we get a little, get excited. A little spark comes. You know it's true. Some of you are blushing right now. Then there are other times when you don't feel anything, but you're still married. Because your marriage is a fact. Your marriage is not a feeling. You have feelings that are attached to your being married, but your marriage is a relationship and it is a fact. It is not a feeling. And you are dangerously close to impulsive divorce when you try to gauge your marriage on your feeling. That's why we have 6-month marriages now. Because people say, well, you know, I'm not feeling it anymore. But tough, you're married. I'm just not, you know, it's not working for me. Tough. Work it out. Because you're married. And your marriage is a fact, not a feeling. I shared with you last week the poem by Martin Luther, the great reformer. And it bears repeating today. Feelings come and feelings go, and feelings are deceiving. My warrant is the word of God. Naught else is worth believing. Though all my heart should feel condemned for want of some sweet token, there is one greater than my heart, whose word cannot be broken. I'll trust in God's unchanging word till soul and body sever. For though all things shall pass away, his word shall stand forever. Amen. There it is. Feelings come and feelings go. Feelings are deceiving. You have felt like Job, but the fact is, God is with us. Amen. Even in our suffering. Feelings and facts are two separate realities. Feelings are real, but they should not be permitted to rule us. It's very dangerous. I even heard that marriage vows have been changed to say, I will love you, but they've left out in some vows, they leave out till death do us part. They say things like, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, sickness, and in health. For as long as we both shall love. Well, isn't that convenient? You're building a back door right there. For as long as we're feeling it. For as long as it's working out. For as long as we are in love. No, even when you don't feel like you're in love anymore, there is the fact of your commitment and your covenant. But here are two facts clearly seen in the epic saga of Job, the feelings and the facts. The one certainty in Job's life, and this is not a feeling, this is the fact, is death. It's staring him in the face. And this chapter holds up these two entities of hope and death. Death is inevitable, and hope is that which fills us as we move towards death. Picture it. You've got this social stigma. Listen to what Job says in verse 6 of our text. Job 17, verse 6. He's speaking of God. He has made me a byword of the people, and I've become one in whose face men spit. He says it wasn't always this way. He's got this internal spiritual despair. Look at verse 11. My days are past. My purposes are broken off, even the thoughts of my heart. Look at verse 15. Where then is my hope? I have a sermon that I preach maybe once a year somewhere in the country. I haven't preached it here. One of these days I shall. I preached it in this city, but at another church. But I have a sermon called Bring Back the Butter that is based on Job chapter 29. I want you to turn to chapter 29 with me. I want to show you something. Job is suffering to such an extent that he feels life is hopeless. And in fact, more realistically, he says, I just miss what I used to enjoy. I used to have status. I used to have people not looking at me and my boils and warts. I used to have people that admired me. In fact, well, I don't want you to think I'm making it up. Let me show it to you. It's in Job chapter 29. Job further continued his discourse and said, "Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness, just as I was in the days of my prime, when the friendly counsel of God was over my head." See, he's mourning his past. He said, I really had it good. There was a time when I just had, it was as if the lamp of God was just over my head. Verse 5, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were around me. Here's a man who's experienced the death of all of his children. He says, I miss the old days when I had my children around me and God was there and present. When my steps, the King James Version says in verse 6, when my steps were bathed in butter. That's where I got the sermon title, Bring Back the Butter. When my steps were bathed with cream, says the New King James Version, and the rock poured out rivers of oil for me. And then he says, and I miss my social status. Look at verse 7. When I went to the gate by the city, when I took my seat in the open square, the young men saw me and hid, and the aged arose and stood. The princes refrained from talking, and they put their hand on their mouth. He says, I remember a day when I used to come in town, people said, oh, here's Job. Nobody, don't say anything. Let's hear from Job. He said, man, when I came in, nobles would stand up. Young men would just point and stare. I have status. And look at me now. Back to our text. Job is missing he articulates it in chapter 29, but as early as chapter 17, he's just simply missing his former days. He was somebody of note, somebody of reputation, somebody of status. Now, time we get to 17:15 of Job, Job is saying, where's my hope? Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt hopeless? I have. The dark night of the soul seems to be turning to day. You who are suffering, be not dismayed. He who brought order out of chaos and light out of darkness is here.
Amen. Yeah.
Now, there's no easy resolution here. I wish I could wrap this up neatly and put a bow on it and say, this is the word of the Lord for today. This text has tension in it. Here is a righteous man suffering, seemingly for no reason other than Satan and God had a conversation, and his name came up. There's no easy resolution here. In fact, Job suggests that the suffering and the corruption and the destructive worm have been around so long they're like family. Look at verse 14 of Job 17. If I say to corruption, you are my father, and to the worm, you are my mother and my sister, where then is hope? If I wait for the grave as my house, if I make my bed in the darkness, where's hope? This is a picture of a man who can't figure it out, for whom there is no happy ending right now. Maybe hope and perceived bright futures will go with him all the way to the end of his life, but right now, he's really suffering. In fact, Norman Hobble, in his work on the book of Job, says of this text, I was really trying to find some answers in 17, and Norman Hobble says in his work on the book of Job, the text is tantalizingly ambiguous. You have the portrait of a suffering, broken man who asks, where then is hope? A fitting question on which to close. Where is hope? Well, it's certainly not found in Job's three friends. It's not found in ours either.
Amen.
If you were to rely on your friends for the restoration of peace when you are suffering, you're going to be sorely disappointed. They can sit with you in your suffering, but they can't restore all that seems to be lost. Where then is hope? Well, our hope is not on our feelings, for feelings come and feelings go. Luther was right. Our hope is not found in our assets. They can be taken away. You know miserable, wealthy people. Hope cannot be found in our assets. No, a person that is experiencing what Job is experiencing, who is looking for hope amidst their suffering and in their suffering, is very wise to look beyond their circumstances and beyond their friends and beyond their material resources.
Amen.
So where is it? I have a suggestion. Side with the hymn writer who articulated this look for hope, Edward Mote. Mote was a pastor at the Rehoboth Baptist Church in Horsham, West Sussex, England. He wrote about 100 hymns, but this one that he wrote in 1834 is his best known, and I think one of his best works. My hope, he said, is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. You can almost picture him feeling like Job. I dare not, it would be foolish to trust the sweetest friend, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. And then you say the refrain with me. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. Somebody just hit an F there on the piano. Who knows music? Somebody just give me an F. Wonderful, wonderful. It's in the key of F. In fact, you'll sing the second stanza with me. When darkness veils his lovely face, I rest on his unchanging grace. I want you to sing it as if you are suffering like Job. When darkness veils his lovely, I rest on his unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. On Christ the solid rock I stand. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. Continue with Mote's text. Imagine you are drowning. Sea of circumstances like Job. His oath, his covenant, his blood support me in the whelming or overwhelming flood.
Yes.
When all around my soul gives way. Think of Job now. He then is all my hope and stay. Sing the refrain with me. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground and for me. It has all to do with when God finally comes back to this place physically in Jesus Christ and straightens out everything that is wrong.
Yes.
When he shall come
Yes.
with trumpet sound.
Yes.
Oh, may I then in him be found, dressed not in my righteousness alone, faultless, rather dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. There'll come a day when all the sufferers, like Job, shall stand before God and everything will have been brought back to order.
Amen. Yes.
All the chaos will have been brought back to order. And darkness will be turned to light. It may not happen for a while. We continue to trust this God, for the God who made Job is still his God.
Amen.
And the God who made you, while you're suffering, he's still God.
Yes.
And the God who has allowed your spirits to be broken and your eyes to be dim is still God.
Amen.
This is our hope. So here's the tension in the text. Hope and death. Job is saying, I just want God to bring back the days I used to enjoy. Now, I'm a byword to people. Now people laugh at me when I go to town.